Watershed Organization was founded in 1993 by Father Herman Bacher and co-founded by Crispino Lobo, who was actually the one who put the systems on the ground, while Father Herman Bacher is the visionary who saw far into the distance as to what could make the difference for the people in semi-arid areas. I joined WOTR in 1996. By 1992 or 3, the Indo-German Watershed Development Program, a bilateral program, was started and launched in the state of Maharashtra. And in order to develop the capacities of the local communities and of NGOs who would be the key partners, the key players in this, they needed an organization that could make it happen. And it was this program that actually gave birth to the Watershed Organisation Trust. Since then, there has been no turning back. We committed ourselves to developing first the methodologies for how to do a very systematic soil and water conservation along watershed lines. It meant that we had to learn a lot of technical approaches on the one hand, and secondly, we had to engage the rural communities, get them involved to be the actual players in the whole game. If it is not for the rural communities who are actually the primary players, stakeholders, the work cannot stand. So with that began our involvement in watershed development. I joined in WOTR in 1996 with the key role of engaging women as active participants. So in a way, yes, I played a role in bringing women to be active players into the whole process. Since 1993 until to date, we have reached over 1,500 villages. We have engaged intensively and right from the beginning with the NGOs and other players. So we developed their capacities and actually accompanied them as to how to engage rural communities and implement the work systematically and thoroughly. Today we are in 8 states and we have covered approximately 8,900 square kilometers of land, to put it in a measurable way, and reaching out to 1.3 million people. I know for the size of India, this is but a nano drop. However, over the years, we realized that this basic stabilizing of land together with the people and with their local institutions capacitated and people and women actively engaged, these are important components that will make a project sustainable. As we went along in the Indo-German Watershed Development Program, the work expanded to include other agencies and support. Around 2000 and 2004, we suddenly had 3 or 4 consecutive years of drought or drought-like conditions. It was for the first time we were hit by the fact that the people who had now become residents of their village had to once again migrate in search of wage labor. And we were wondering what was actually happening, till we realized that there was something of what we call today the climate variability. You know, having 3 to 4 consecutive years of drought-like situation, the land cannot take it. And that was when we began to realize that there is something more that needs to be done to make the land more sustainable. And it was including the climate angle, this unknown creature. Around 2006-07, we started thinking about this very intensively. We looked at things that did not go well or things that had to be improved on, and we started making the changes. And it was this black box at that time the climate variability that we had to look at. We had no blueprint to follow. So, however, as water has normally been daring in taking up challenges, we decided we would do a project on climate change adaptation. Around 2009, we had the support of the Swiss Agency for Development Cooperation and NABARD, the National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development, who were our partners earlier in the Indo-German program. So with these two partners, NABARD and the SDC, we launched a pilot at that time for climate change adaptation. What we realized was, without watershed development, we could not take it forward. So building on participatory watershed development, we now looked at a climate angle. Around the same time, we realized there was another major player coming into the picture in the rural communities, and that was the market pulls. After we left villages having done successfully watershed development programs, water increased, more land came under agriculture, there was more soil was available in the villages, and we had left the villages, and people moved into commercial agriculture. With commercial agriculture came changing of crops. They went into new varieties as was being promoted in the markets. They went into extensive groundwater exploitation. Farmers who were living earlier on rain-fed agriculture now saw a cash cow in the water available, and they went into extensive exploitation by digging wells and bore wells. And I have to say that despite the increase in the number of bore wells and wells, the water table was really high and people could take assured crops. So cropping seasons had increased from a one crop of 2 to 3 months to a 2 crop season of about 8 to 9 months. So labor had increased in the village. People had very few, if any, had to migrate in search of work. But when we went to analyze the situation, we realized that these were two critical players who were bringing in newer aspects that would be leading to unsustainability of the land. It was the climate angle and the market pulls. And we were faced with the challenge of how do you respond to these uncertain situations? Who was more vulnerable? How were they vulnerable? What were the livelihoods that were vulnerable? What was happening to the land and the biophysical conditions? That was the time when we had the climate change adaptation project, we realized that we needed to assess the conditions of the people and the land in a more systematic and thorough way. Again, as I said, we had no blueprint. We had heard about villages and vulnerabilities of villages and districts being assessed, and they were put up as indices. We couldn't understand how to interpret those indices, leave alone how would the communities do it. So we realized that we had to go back to the drawing board and develop now a tool for assessing vulnerabilities, but from a bottom-up approach. And that's when we worked on this tool called the community-driven vulnerability evaluation, because we begin it from the bottom up. The abbreviation is CoDrive. We have developed a software for it because we realized it has to be done very rapidly. We developed a methodology of how to do the assessments in a quick way across landscapes. And the results we got from this particular tool of assessing vulnerabilities had given us, on the one hand, an assessment of the biophysical conditions. What was the status of the biophysical conditions? The land topography, the green cover, the forest cover, the water resources. So it looks as the biophysical natural resource base where we had earlier begun on watershed development. But it also helps us assess the vulnerabilities of the different communities that live within. The large farmers, small and medium marginal farmers, the landless, the different communities, the tribal communities, and the livelihoods that they depend on, be it agriculture, cattle rearing, livestock rearing, fisheries, or any other. So this tool helped us to then develop what we call the climate change adaptation projects, which respond to all these components. It takes the biophysical conditions and the livelihoods of people into it. We realized also that biodiversity was getting lost in the whole regeneration of the lands. We needed to protect the ecospace that the people live in, because each ecosystem is so important. And that's when we developed a methodology for assessing, developing the People's Biodiversity Register, which will help the local communities to be actively engaged in protecting their biodiversity, the ecosystems they live in because they know it best, and the agrobiodiversity. As time went on, we realized also that if we have to make this land continued to be sustainable for its people, it needs to help the people address agriculture in a sustainable way. And with that, we developed the we developed our own understanding of adaptive sustainable agriculture, which includes training the farmers on a package of practices right from tilling to the time they harvest the crop and the crop rotations, to how to select the seeds, how to move into more locally available seeds besides meeting the cash crops, but also to include the component of agromet advisories. How do they get the messages of what would be the likely changes in the weather and how to address them? So the project gave us the opportunity of placing in the villages automated weather stations, and these stations were giving us real-time information of the different villages. Today we have over 100 automated weather stations placed in different villages. But for this, we don't have the mandate to give them, and nor do we have the expertise to give them the accuracy of the weather forecasts. And here is where we contacted the India Meteorological Department, the IMD, who now has a big role to play with us. We work very closely with them. Our data from the villages go to them, the servers there. They provide us for each village the 3-day weather forecasts. This we communicate then to the local communities. But then there was another player that had to come in over here, and that is the experts in agriculture. While we do have agriculture experts on the ground, we didn't want to take the responsibility by ourselves because we have the state agriculture universities. So we have a memorandum of understanding with 2 state agriculture universities and the Central Dryland Institute for Research, CREDA, who have the mandate of giving these advices to farmers and to help us develop good methodologies to communicate to the farmers. So we have linked with these institutes, and so together with the Met Department and the agriculture universities, we are able to give more realistic and good advisories to the farmers so that they can address the climate variability. And the third important point over here is managing groundwater, because if we don't have farmers managing the water well, they will be the losers. All of us will be losers. So we've trained them now in water budgeting at the village level so that they can manage the use of water based on the water, based on the precipitation. So in a whole, this is what we have been doing. Prior to watershed development, farmers were growing crops for sustenance. So it was mainly the native variety crops that they grew, pulses, cereals, and a lot of local variety crops. The moment soil and water were conserved and available, and agriculture areas had increased, water was available, farmers started seeing that commercial crops would bring them income. So there was a shift. Around 97, 98, there was suddenly a crunch on onions. The prices of onions, which is very crucial in the Indian diet, just shot up. And these farmers who are in this semi-arid area actually were growing onions in a small quantity. It was this particular surge in the prices of onions that made all the farmers start thinking of commercial crops. But simultaneously what happened was that as water and soil were improving, the agriculture, I will call them the merchants, those who were promoting seeds and a newer variety of crops and seeds, started looking at the possibilities of promoting the latest variety of seeds, high-yielding variety, in these remote villages. The farmers then adopted the new crops. Sometimes there were seeds that were totally alien to the area, but not knowing how they would be using it, they had to depend completely on those who were selling the seeds, also for the fertilizers and how to use it. With that came the introduction of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. So now farmers were totally dependent on the agriculture, on the market, for the instructions on how to use the seeds, for the instructions on the chemicals to be put in, as well as for fertilizers, as well as for pesticides. They were totally externally driven, and this raised the cost of agriculture tremendously. However, I have to say that production had also increased. So farmers were torn between assessing the production, the earnings that they got from it, without always assessing what were the input costs. And this led to actually a downhill move towards the soil degradation and water exploitation. So these were the market pulls that were really affecting the farmers. For the farmer, the quality of the soil is the production that it gives the farmer. So if the soil health is good, having the various nutrients it needs to provide good crops for the farmer, then the soil is good. However, on the one hand, in order to maintain this good production, farmers were moving into highly chemical agriculture. What we did get from our farmers is, if there is a heavy rainfall, the response to it is, following the rainfall, put in more chemicals. So they hope to get more agriculture. If it is a drought, they say, we put in more chemicals, we hope we will get more production. So for most of their responses is more chemical fertilizers with the hope of getting more production. But what the farmers began to realize is that the soil was getting hard. If there were no rains and no water, the soil was really getting so hard that it was difficult to till the soil. And the biomass content of the soil was greatly reduced. The elderly farmers could easily make the difference of the soil that is soft, that accumulates water, that has a rich nutrient content and is soft, as against hard cracking soil, because it cannot take in, it is so chemicalized that it has no more biomass content. This is what the farmers talk about soil health. I think we have to admit the fact that whether we are living in rural communities or we are living in cities, without the land resources, without food, without water, without clean air, we cannot survive. So for me, the natural resource base, the rural communities are very crucial to our whole survival because we get our water from there. They protect the water, they conserve the water to feed the cities. They provide the foods to feed the cities besides themselves. So it is very essential that we have to move in this direction. Drought has not been alien to India. We've been having droughts coming on and off, and sometimes very severe droughts. However, what we are told by the climate scientists is that India is a hotspot for climate change, and droughts is something that is coming to stay. Droughts manifesting itself by long dry spells during the monsoons, reduced amount of rainfall. But on the other hand, there are also possibilities of having extreme sudden cloudbursts or intensive heavy rains in a short while. So the issue of managing, these weather variabilities has to take into consideration both, and to manage the ecosystems, we have to take into consideration both understanding and managing drought, as well as managing the extreme events and sudden heavy downpours and unseasonal rain. So getting water at the wrong time is the key, is the problem that we actually are likely to face, and we have begun to experience it. What we need to do is, I'm only saying we are trying to do this. I don't know how it will pan out actually when the drought manifests itself, is helping people to conserve water and use water very judiciously for as and what is required. So managing the crops that are required and giving the water to the crops for that which is grown during the monsoon season is crucial for addressing the drought period. In earlier years, we would say, well, usually for the monsoon crop, we would never do any irrigation. It was not needed, but not today. Today we need to have protective irrigation for the monsoon crops to be assured of at least one crop in a drought year. And therefore, going into micro irrigation is going to be important, and increasing the soil moisture by improving the biomass content and other mechanisms to conserve water can help protect the soil. But playing into this picture is also getting the advisories from the Met Department, the Agromet advisories as to what is the amount of water available in the soil and how to provide the required water according to the predictions for no rainfall or low rainfall. So these are the various aspects that have to come together. And at the same time, when the heavy rains come in short spans, harvesting all the water for that time so that it doesn't run off. So we have to manage both together. For pastoralists, it is important that it's a big challenge actually. I really have to say, because with more and more land coming under agriculture, there's very little commons left, there's very little land left for free grazing. So the challenge today is managing, at least in some of the areas where I work, I will not generalize it for the rest of India, but growing more fodder crops. I will not say looking at the feed and fodder for the exotic species, but I will talk of growing more fodder crops, managing food crops that provide food and fodder. You have some of the local varieties which are very good in that, rather than going into the commercial crops which have very little fodder. So it's managing like sorghum, pearl millet, wheat, paddy are some of the crops that provide both, particularly the former two. And this is important to look at a very sustainable management of both the land and water for food and fodder crops for livestock, but you also have fodder coming from as crop residues. Right. So the stocks of maize, of sorghum, of pearl millet are very large. Yeah. So it gives you the grain and it gives you the fodder. Yeah. So looking at these sort of crops which were native to the area, we need to move into that. Yeah. Farmers and the animals love the fodder trees because they give green fodder. So that is important. And promotion of both the agroforestry, the agri-silvipasture is important in the whole landscape management. And I think this is to be promoted in a very integrated way. I think we need to look at having the livelihoods coming in a very integrated way and a very holistic way, where what we would call, what we did in one of our areas was working on a local money multiplier. So one farmer or one owner produces fodder trees, who sells it to those who have livestock, and others can purchase it from them, or in this way, the whole landscape needs to be managed. What I would say is we need good land management that will sustain the land, that will also provide livelihoods and also protect both the livestock as well as the as well as earning opportunities for farmers. But here I would add one more component, is from my findings in the villages, because we are working in areas where the climate variability is very severe. If the farmers depend only on land-based livelihoods, then in a time of drought, there is a tendency to exploit the land, exploit the water, exploit the fodder trees. And so that is not sustainable. So the farmers would need the land-based and non-land-based livelihoods as an alternate livelihood, which will then also protect the natural resources. The most satisfying moments have been when we have left villages and gone back to them and see that the land that was once degraded has become green and productive, and there are smiles on the faces of the people. We also feel very happy that in a number of other villages, the people themselves are taking the step to protect the resources. And another satisfying aspect is that while we did watershed development since the past 25 years, there are other agencies who are calling us to provide the knowledge and to be knowledge partners for major projects. And this satisfies us because we feel convinced that what we started way back in the early 90s still has value today. Like today, one of the Indian celebrities, the actor Amir Khan, has started a movement to promote watershed development with people's involvement and people taking the lead. And WOTR has been invited to be a knowledge partner and a trainer in this. So for us, this was very satisfying. Another satisfying thing is that the government of Maharashtra has started the Village Social Transformation Program, where they want to reach 1,000 villages in 3 years. And WOTR has been invited to be a knowledge partner to share this and to accompany and to give trainings to villagers. So we are very happy when both government, civil society and other players feel that what we started years ago still holds value and we can still contribute. And my last statement I would like to make is, years ago when we started this program, Father Herman Barker said, "There is no response to drought without participatory watershed development." And I'm happy to say that we are convinced that this is the base on which climate change adaptation and enhancing biodiversity concerns can be addressed for a good future tomorrow.